And now we are going to unfinished business, and we have unfinished business, and it is our board goals. And the last meeting, we had a first read of the goals, and we had some discussion. We had one minor change, and we decided to table it and have a second read this meeting so that everyone could be heard. And before we begin, I just want to set the table. Can I have a motion to adopt the board goals for a second read?
So moved.
Okay, a second?
Second.
Okay. Ira, did you want to say something?
No, I just felt it was important to have the full board present before we adopt the board goals. That's why I moved to table at the last meeting. Generally comfortable with the goals, but I think everybody should have a chance to be heard.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and Bill, did you want to say anything before we open up the discussion?
It would only be to repeat what I said last time, so you can read it in the minutes.
Good to go. Oh, sounds good. Okay. Anybody want to comment on the board goals?
I think they're terrific. I wasn't here at the last meeting, and I appreciate your putting them over to this meeting. My only suggestion for them, and I really like, by the way, the education reform and advocacy goal here, which I think very well describes kind of our efforts in that regard. The only suggestion I would have for it is that it, in one place, it establishes authority and support for the superintendent's activities in these matters on behalf of the district. And I think it would be prudent to put some statement in there about reports to the board before or after. I mean, it sort of depends, Bill, on what you're intending to do, and if it's if you have time to inform the board and keep us up to date in advance, terrific. Then you get our buy-in in advance, or if not, then you report sort of at the next meeting, kind of thing.
That's a good idea. That last sentence hints at it, but it says the board will endeavor. Maybe I
Right.
say the board will endeavor to remain informed, blah, blah, by receiving regular reports from the superintendent
Exactly.
and its members. Because sometimes
Okay.
you have a report.
Right.
I suspect Scott's going to be involved in this year.
Yep, right.
So I'll say those two. Can I just
Yep.
make that addition here?
Perfect.
Or edit, whatever it is.
And I didn't, that's terrific. And I didn't think it was necessary to formalize here the work that Scott and I are doing through West Putt and other places. That work I've been doing for a bunch of years already, and there's never been a board goal on it. I just want to make sure I go on the record with the board now, so they know that work's being done, and you know, if anybody has any concerns about it. I mean, I report
Kind of
back
your
on
legacy.
on a
Yeah.
regular basis. Okay, fair enough.
So I would propose you could vote on it. And what I'll say in the last sentence is the board will endeavor to remain informed about the reform efforts in New York by receiving regular reports from the superintendent and its own members on political developments and local activities, and encouraging the superintendent to make recommendations for action.
Any other comments? Okay, then we have a motion on the table. Ready to vote? Okay, all in favor of the board goals for 2015, 2016 as amended? Okay, approved. Nice work, board.
Thank you.
And Bill, thank you for the suggestions of these very germane and appropriate board goals.
We're now 60 days ahead of schedule, so we probably could adjourn now.
Pretty good. And I just
Not going to be for the next 2 months.
That's it.
Yeah. And Ira, I want to echo what you had said at the last meeting, because I think it's important for the community to know that these board goals set our general direction, and they're certainly not the full work of the board.
Right, that's for sure.
Okay. Nice work, everybody. Okay, and new business. And we did add a new business item, and that is 10.1, it's conflict of interest practices. The nature of hiring sometimes is fluid, especially in the area of coaching. And the board has to approve all hiring. And there are laws in place, there's policies in place, and there's procedures in place. But we thought this would be a good idea to talk about this. We have a couple new board members. And just to review, mostly around the coaching, any potential conflicts of interest, just so that we're all comfortable when we're approving these, that
Let
policies.
me introduce the topic.
great.
This became an issue in particular last year. We had a coach who had worked here for many years successfully. I knew him when I was principal of the high school, certainly a good guy and a successful coach. But because of his business, he was not only coaching kids, but some of the kids he was coaching, he was receiving, he was working with privately and receiving money from them. So we reviewed our conflict of interest policy, which had been in place for many years, and determined that that was a conflict of interest. So going forward, Jen's going to describe what the athletic department now does to make sure that that doesn't happen. But the conflict of interest policy came up this year because we hired a coach who previously had been in a situation where he was a private coach and received money from students, even potentially, I suppose, some students, theoretically, he could have received money in the past from students who are currently on his team. It's not the case, actually, in this case. But the point is the policy only reflects current conflicts of interest. It doesn't go into past conflicts of interest. And I think it would be difficult to write one that did go into past conflict of interest. So Jen, can you talk a little bit about what Mike established, I guess, and now Rob is continuing?
Well, I think when faced with questions about how we handle conflicts of interest, we of course go to the policies, and there are two specific components of policy 2160, which is the school district officer and employee code of ethics policy, that speak directly to this particular conflict of interest. And one is about investments with other official duties, and that really takes place for people who are involved in owning businesses and benefiting from them financially. And the second one, which is number 7, is about private employment and creating any kind of conflict that might impair discharging of responsibilities and relationships with children in the school setting. So those covering us, we thought it's probably best in the hiring process to establish something with physical education and athletics to have procedures that are in place so we are sure that everybody's very aware of the conflict of interest. We didn't want people coming into this position and then us finding out later on that they were perhaps connected with some other venue that was
Just
conflict.
for the new board members, this popped up a couple of years ago when you had coaches who not only were coaching varsity, but also were coaching travel teams. And kids from the district would also be trying out for the travel teams, and it doesn't take great imagination to figure all the possibilities for mischief, at least maybe not even real, but perceptive, that could arise with something like that. And even going back a little further, we had issues where young coaches would come and all of a sudden they'd be flooded with opportunities from parents. And it's taken a while to shake out, but I think now we're really on the right track. But there really is a history to this, and it's not an issue where the board is looking to make work, as it were. We really have had to address this over the last few years, and being that we're a policy entity, it really is a policy issue.
So it was easy for us to develop guidelines that really adhere to the language of those two components of the policy. We use those guidelines when we're interviewing potential coaches in the district. As Bill said, we cannot take the fact that we are looking for trained coaches. We are looking for people who have experience to work with our kids. The likelihood that somebody might have been in some other capacity in a town-related sport is probable. So in order to safeguard that, we did the guidelines for coaches, and it really specifies about direct funds and not being able to recruit students for other things that you might do in other capacities. Particularly, we needed it to cover our coaches who are here who want to work with kids in a non-paying capacity. We may have a soccer coach who, before the season even occurs, goes to do some little camp with the kids and work with them, and they're not being compensated for that. We didn't want this policy to express that that might be a conflict of interest. So all of those are articulated at the time that we do hire, and we are abiding by our policy that if they are not forthcoming with correct information, that is cause for termination. So.
And I think
been
for
much
board
easier.
members, this is the classic, you've got the policy and then you have the practices. The guidelines for coaches that we gave you are the ones Mike developed last spring after a very painful, dismissal of a coach who'd been here for a long time. We developed these guidelines to try to respect coaches and to respect the potential conflict.
And when we're getting, when the board is getting these coaches, a lot of times it's an emergency hiring situation, but by the time we're getting it, you've already done your due diligence. By the time it comes to us, we can be confident that, that those conflicts aren't existing,
Right.
procedures have been followed,
Right.
the law's been followed, policy's been followed.
Fingerprints
So-
have been checked.
It's quick that we get it and have to approve it and turn around, but you've done your work beforehand,
There's
correct?
been a significant amount of research and articulating what our policies are to prospective employees before they are presented to you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Did these guidelines go through the policy committee?
No.
they do not.
And I'd suggest it's probably a good exercise to do that. And the other question I have is under 4, coaches may coach under the following conditions, and there are 4 bullets there. I don't know whether those are, if either of those conditions are satisfied, a coach may coach, or if all of the conditions must be satisfied in order for somebody to instruct for compensation.
Those
So-
are situations which do not represent conflicts. So all 4 of them could apply because none of them represent a conflict.
Okay.
But they're to help coaches decide. One of the things we want is for our coaches to be involved in the town, for instance.
That's a great way
Yeah.
to phrase this.
Yeah.
Neither of these following situations create a conflict of interest under these guidelines, A, B, C, and D. Because I read that and trying to figure out, well, okay, if I want to coach and participate and instruct for financial compensation, there's 4 conditions.
It's important to note that these are procedures for us.
Yeah, so
The
they're not-
policy is
Is what's posted.
what's posted and
Yeah,
what the.
we can take another look
I
at the
get it,
language,
but,
but
we let somebody go and he sues us and, it just, and the guidelines we usually have, don't, check me if I'm wrong, but I thought the regulations and guidelines we have go through the policy.
these are not
committee.
those kind of guidelines. These are guidelines for hiring.
These are different kind of guidelines than guidelines?
Well,
So,
these are hiring guidelines.
Well, you can call them
So-
practices or
so-
something. We have,
it shouldn't say Board Policy 2160 guidelines then. It say these are informal, things that we consider and,
I think, Brett, it's important to note that this is what Rob Castagna is using when he's talking to potential employees. These are the guidelines for, let's consider every parameter that might exist as far as we know it in the implementation of this policy so that I can perhaps provide examples for them and give statements.
I don't mean to
Yeah.
belabor this, but if this is coming to the board, it's called a guideline and we approve it, it sort of sets policy for the district in that way.
or I shouldn't have shown it to the board.
Yeah, I was going to say, we don't actually
We can change it.
approve
We can
It's,
change it from guidelines
Right, I
for
think that's-
coaches to
Considerations.
Practices.
how we practice the policy.
Considerations in the athletic department for
We'll find a
hiring
word.
coaches,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Pre-hire qualifications.
Let's not wordsmith here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jen will take care of it.
Yeah.
She's
This
an
is just
she's
a-
an English
this-
major.
This was
I'm
just
glad
to
we had this
explain, yeah,
discussion.
so-
I thought this was part of our official
No, no.
board
No,
policy
no,
guidelines.
no, it's
It would
just
be in
to
policy.
just for us
Okay.
to understand.
Yep.
Okay, any other comments, anybody else? Okay, let's move on then to special report, opening of schools. And our student enrollment.
You did this to me last time, too.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Well, I'm sorry. Okay.
I'll do a song and
Wait, wait,
dance and
One
we'll-
second, I just want to go back a second. If this is going to be the practice that is going to be used by the athletic department in determining whether or not to hire, and it's not going to be a policy of the board, then it's not really an action item for the board.
No.
It's not an action item. We were just, it
Then,
was
then
just,
then it's simply a point of
It's a
information
discussion,
for the
yeah.
board.
that's exactly right.
Okay.
And we'll find some new language. We'll call them athletic departments guidelines or athletic departments.
I mean, on the other hand, though, if we felt that these guidelines were inappropriate or did not do what they were supposed to do, then our job would be to tell the athletic department, come up with something better.
Right.
Okay. I mean, it's not as if we're simply going to wash our hands and say, do what you want. This is an important thing that we do have some oversight on, at least through you, right?
Right.
Okay.
And it sounds to me like with teachers and tutoring, we say you can't tutor somebody if there's even a possibility that they may come to you, right? That's the conflict.
Yeah.
And what we're doing with coaches is sort of bringing them up to the
Consciously
same
different,
kind of
yeah.
standard,
That's right.
except with a big carve-out about if you've ever done it in the past. It doesn't matter. So you
Well,
could
no, that would only be when they're hired. That would be the same for teachers. We hire people who might have used to tutor kids.
only when they're hired.
Only when
Okay.
they're hired. That would be the only carve-out.
Okay. So if a teacher could tutor a kid in our district for years before they're actually hired by the district, they get hired by the district.
Right.
And then they
Everything
have those
stops.
kids in their classes.
Okay.
Likewise, if, we had confronted that coach last year and said, this is a new thing, you can either quit your job or coach for us. If he had quit his job, it would have been.
Now, why the carve-out for elementary? Why is that different?
Because we want them involved. And we don't think it's there's a big difference between the conflict of interest a teacher has who gives grades and is responsible for a child's education and a coach in terms of
Because they're not
the
placing them
weight.
on a,
They're
they're not
not.
placing them on a team at the elementaries.
Yeah, plus in terms of our mission, the educational component is far outweighs.
Okay,
athletic.
thanks for that clarification.
Okay.